Joining me now to react to the vote is Rachel McLean, MP. She's also Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party as well. Good evening to you, Rachel.
Hi, good evening.
Your reaction to the result of the vote tonight, you supported it, you were clear in your support of it before the vote took place, and you must be mighty relieved to see that it's been passed.
Yes, I'm pleased that it's been passed, and I'm pleased that obviously colleagues listened to the debate and they listened to the arguments and they gave the legislation the support this evening, because it's important that it's passed onto the statute book, because it gives us that basis, that fundamental basis on which we can build. And of course people will have discussions and they will have ideas, and I know that the government is obviously having those discussions with people. So I think it's a good result tonight, and I think obviously the government is very pleased to see that pass tonight.
The tricky bit now, Rachel, and I hope you'll agree with me here, that the kind of drama around this bill is far from over, sadly. And I don't kind of promote that drama, but we know that those right-wing members within your party and the 5 different factions, the 5 families, as they're being called, have said that they wanted to get the vote through so that they could table amendments to it. And Rishi Sunak's indicated that he's prepared to look at amendments. Does that not just kick the can down the road? I mean, does that not just mean that we're going to be having these conversations and this drama in January? It just prolongs it.
Well, I think the first thing I would say is that we in the Conservative Party are one big family. And so ultimately we are all united behind the one objective of dealing with illegal migration. And part of that is having a strong deterrent so that we can stop the loss of lives in the Channel. And that's what you saw in the numbers tonight in the voting lobbies. And it is in stark contrast, if I just may say, to Labour, who do nothing except vote against our plans. And every time we come forward with realistic plans to deal with this issue, which has led to some tragic loss of life, let's not forget.
Well, obviously,
they have no coherent plan apart from
Labour say, and I have pressed them on this. Labour say that they've got their own plans. They want to increase border patrol. They want to advance, but I don't want to talk about Labour for now. I want to focus on your specialism, which is your own party. Go on.
So absolutely, but I have been a minister in the Home Office, and I've served when we've been passing this legislation, and so I have an intimate, detailed knowledge of the issues that exist, and it is not a simple problem to solve. If it was a simple problem to solve, and if it was as easy to solve as the Labour Party make it out to be, then we would have done that. Of course we would have done it. We would have done it years ago. It's a global phenomenon. It's affecting countries all over the world. And by the way, we're actually doing some quite effective things in some of the measures that we are putting in place.
Yeah. Okay.
And to your point about will there be further debates? Yes, there will be, but there always are when we pass legislation. That's not an unusual state of affairs at all, because there's so many aspects to it. And people have legitimately got different views about different aspects of the legislation. And it's not really just a question of sort of left and right. It's just a question of people's approach to what is the best way to making something work. And I think the other point that's really important to say to people is that there's no one's got a crystal ball about how the courts are going to interpret anything in this space, because what you're talking about is creating a legal framework, creating primary legislation, and then it is up to courts and judges to how they are going to interpret that. But
you're going to have to get this right to the point that the government do not want, for the majority of cases, they don't want any chance at all that there will be an appeal against being deported to Rwanda. That needs to happen. Right. And I understand that the legislation states, that yes, there is still a very small chance that an individual claim can be made. But that doesn't satisfy some of the right wing of your group. And they're going to place amendments. So my next question for you, Rachel McLean, is can you stomach a slightly stricter bill in terms of disapplying international law? Can you personally stomach a more robust piece of legislation? Because that is the only way that quite a lot of MPs within your party, that is the only way that they're going to see it through a third stage.
Well, I think if I can sort of put it this way, I think you're getting a bit ahead of yourself with this. I think what colleagues will want to do and are doing, and rightly are doing, is talking to the ministerial team. They will be talking to the legal experts, the legal teams in the government and other advisors that they have. And they will be just testing the assumptions of what's actually in the legislation.
Yeah, but Rachel, some of these MPs have already spoken to their... sorry to interrupt you, but some of these MPs have already been taking legal advice. We've already heard from the various groups that the legislation has holes in it. That was one of the quotes, that it's not robust enough. So we already know that they are dissatisfied with it. And they've already said this evening, the only way that it progresses any further is if they're able to table amendments that effectively make it more robust, which is not going to please the more moderate members of your party. And so you're in this impossible situation. So I'm asking you, as a Conservative MP, what can you stomach? Can you make concessions? You're in favour of the bill. You like the way it stands right now. But can you concede? Can you deal with it being a little bit tougher? Can you deal with it disapplying international law? Can you deal with it disapplying domestic UK human rights law, which is, certainly a discussion that is going to be had?
Yes, and I mean, look, this is not a question for me as an individual, because I will look at what is brought forward and judge it on its own merits. It's not a broad sweeping question of asking me to put principles down now. I want a bill that will work. That is all I care about. And there are lots of different things in this bill that may or may not be tough enough in the views of some colleagues and some people and some legal experts. But ultimately, it's about what is the holistic effect of this legislation. That is what I'm going to be interested in, because you can pull out one individual clause and have legitimately in the same party have a different view about how effective it's going to be, because ultimately none of us know until it's actually tested in the courts. That's how legislation works. You make the legislation and then people will test it through the legal system, and that's what we're not able to predict how that will play out in time. But I think that just to go back to your comment, which you asked me, and you said, isn't this impossible? I don't agree it's impossible. This is the art of politics, if you like. This is what the Prime Minister and his team and the ministers, the excellent ministers, by the way, in the Home Office now, will be doing. They will be having intensive conversations and really testing people's views about what needs to happen. And you're always going to get this sort of balancing act, I think, which you're seeing now, because, of course, we have got people who are saying, well, if it goes any further, I'm not going to support it. And you've got people on the other side of the argument, because these are very emotive arguments and these are important issues. So people they care deeply about them. But the art of politics is squaring that away, because ultimately everybody wants the same thing at the end of the day. And that's I believe that we can get to that with goodwill and a lot of intelligent and careful discussions and very considered discussions and really listening to people carefully.